Alright folks, welcome back to Boss Economics World, the only show on the internet that treats the global economy like the slightly unhinged, caffeine-fueled casino that it actually is. It's October 4th, 2025, and while you were busy trying to figure out if your new AI-powered toaster is secretly judging your bagel choices, Washington, D.C. has decided to play its favorite game, government shutdown chicken. But this time, the car hurtling towards the cliff has a fascinatingly ironic passenger list. The issue at the heart of this fiscal standoff? Subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. Yes, that Affordable Care Act. Obamacare. The program Republicans have spent the better part of 15 years trying to repeal, dismantle, and launch into the sun. And here's the kicker, the punchline so perfect you'd think a late-night comedy writer scripted it: the very people who would be financially obliterated by the removal of these subsidies are disproportionately, wait for it, Republican voters. You can't make this stuff up. It's like a firefighters union voting to defund the fire department. It's like a turkey lobbying for an earlier Thanksgiving. This isn't just politics, people, this is a masterclass in economic self-sabotage, a beautiful, tragic case study in what happens when ideology smacks headfirst into the brick wall of reality. So, grab your beverage of choice, because we're about to dive deep into the numbers and unpack the glorious, convoluted, and frankly hilarious paradox of the GOP's Obamacare trap. Let's start with the headline data, the numbers that are causing some serious heartburn in the Republican National Committee strategy room. According to the latest 2024 data compiled by our good friends at the nonpartisan Kaiser Family Foundation, a staggering 12 million Americans in Republican-held U.S. House districts are covered by ACA marketplace plans. That's compared to just 9 million in Democratic-held districts. Let that sink in. In the grand political battleground, the red territories are more reliant on this supposedly socialist blue team policy than the blue territories are. It gets even juicier. Of the 75 congressional districts where at least 10% of the population is enrolled in an Obamacare policy, a whopping 47 of them are represented by Republicans. This is a classic economics lesson in stated preference versus revealed preference. Stated preference is what you tell a pollster. It's the bumper sticker on your truck. It's yelling repeal and replace at a town hall. It's what you say you want. Revealed preference, on the other hand, is what you actually do. It's where you spend your money and your time. It's quietly logging onto healthcare.gov in November because, as it turns out, going bankrupt from a routine appendectomy is a terrible retirement strategy, regardless of your political affiliation. What this data reveals is a massive chasm between the political identity of millions of voters and their raw, undeniable economic needs. Think about the archetypal MAGA voter the media loves to portray. It's often not a Wall Street banker. As Larry Levitt at KFF points out, a huge chunk of this coalition is made up of small business owners, farmers, independent contractors, and gig economy workers in jobs without employer-provided coverage. These are the very people the ACA marketplace was designed to catch. They are the entrepreneurs, the self-reliant folks who, ironically, need this government-subsidized safety net the most because they exist outside the traditional corporate structure. They voted for a party promising to dismantle the very lifeboat that's keeping their heads above water. So, how did this beautiful paradox come to be? The answer lies in a phenomenon economists love to talk about, the law of unintended consequences, but in this case, it was supercharged, to borrow a term from Levitt, by two major factors. First, the Great Medicaid Standoff. When the ACA was passed, it had two main pillars for expanding coverage, the subsidized marketplaces and a massive expansion of Medicaid, the government program for the poor. The Supreme Court made the Medicaid expansion optional for states. And what did many Republican-run states do, particularly in the South and the Midwest? In a fit of political pique aimed at President Obama, they said, no, thank you. They rejected billions in federal dollars to make a political point. The economic consequence? Millions of their own low-income citizens, who would have qualified for nearly free Medicaid, were left in a coverage gap. They weren't poor enough for the old Medicaid rules but weren't rich enough to afford insurance on their own. The only option left for many of them was to try and get a heavily subsidized plan on the ACA marketplace. So, by trying to starve one part of Obamacare, these Republican governors and legislatures inadvertently funneled their own citizens directly into the other part. They essentially built an on-ramp to the very program they despised. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a fiscal policy proposal. Second, the post-pandemic economic realignment. The COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent economic shifts acted as a massive accelerant. The enhanced premium tax credits, first passed as a temporary relief measure, made ACA plans dramatically cheaper, pulling millions more people into the market. But more profoundly, the nature of work has changed. The Great Resignation, the rise of the gig economy, and the normalization of remote contract work have decoupled millions of Americans from traditional, 9-to-5, employer-sponsored health insurance. The latest Q3 2025 report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the contingent and alternative employment workforce has grown by 15% since 2020. That's millions of new freelancers, consultants, and entrepreneurs. For them, the ACA isn't a political football, it's a critical piece of business infrastructure. It's the difference between chasing their dream and being one illness away from ruin. This new economic reality means the ACA constituency is no longer just the urban poor or young invincibles. It is now deeply embedded in the heart of entrepreneurial, rural, and suburban America, in other words, the GOP's backyard. This brings us to the shutdown fight of October 2025 and the looming 2026 midterm elections. Democrats are looking at this situation and seeing a carbon copy of their 2018 midterm playbook, where they flipped 40 seats and retook the House by running almost exclusively on protecting the ACA from Republican repeal efforts. Now, they have an even more potent weapon. They don't have to talk about a hypothetical repeal. They just have to sit back and let the existing law, the expiration of these subsidies, do the dirty work for them. Let's talk numbers. Because while political rhetoric is cheap, healthcare premiums are not. If these subsidies expire, the KFF estimates that average premiums will jump by 114%. This isn't some abstract economic model, this is a kitchen table catastrophe waiting to happen. The Congressional Budget Office, Washington's official scorekeeper, forecasts that 4 million people will lose their health coverage entirely. They will be priced out of the market overnight. Let's make this real. Meet Amy Bielowski, the 60-year-old small business owner in Georgia from the report. She runs an entertainment company. Thanks to the subsidies, her premium is about $30 a month. Without them, it could easily shoot up to $300, $400, or more. She says a jump to $100 would put her over the edge. This isn't a choice between Starbucks and Folgers, it's a choice between her health and her business. Now let's create a more detailed, and utterly plausible, persona. Meet Bob, a 62-year-old self-employed carpenter in a rural county in Arizona, a key swing state. He makes about $60,000 a year, a solid, middle-class living. Thanks to the subsidies, he pays around $150 a month for a decent silver plan. If the subsidies expire, his premium for that exact same plan could skyrocket to over $1,300 a month. That's over $15,000 a year, or 25% of his gross income, just for health insurance. What does Bob do? Does he close his business and try to find a job at Home Depot for the benefits? Does he retire early and pray he doesn't get sick before Medicare kicks in? Or does he get incredibly, furiously angry at the politicians who let this happen? This is the very essence of pocketbook voting. You can sell a voter on abstract ideas about freedom and limited government, but when they get a bill in the mail that has quadrupled, the issue becomes intensely personal and concrete. Democrats are already running online ads in 35 targeted Republican districts, not with complex policy papers, but with a simple, brutal message: your healthcare costs are about to explode, and it's their fault. For the finance pros and data nerds in the audience, let's zoom in on the electoral map, because this is where the economic risk translates directly into political risk. The nonpartisan Cook Political Report has rated several districts as toss-ups for 2026. In at least 8 of these critical districts, in places like Arizona, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, and Colorado, the number of ACA enrollees as a percentage of the population is larger than the 2024 presidential vote margin. This means the block of voters who are about to get a massive premium hike is large enough, on its own, to swing the entire election. It's a constituency that, as Levitt says, will be very engaged. You think people are passionate about politics? Wait until you threaten their access to life-saving medication. Now, let's look at the Republican strongholds of Florida and Texas. These aren't swing states in the same way, but the numbers are even more staggering. In Florida, every single one of its 28 congressional districts has more than 10% of its residents enrolled on the ACA exchange. This is an absolutely stunning statistic. In 5 of those districts, 3 of which are held by Republicans, enrollment exceeds 30%. Let's pick one, Florida's 27th congressional district, represented by Republican Maria Elvira Salazar. It's a diverse, working-class area in Miami-Dade County. KFF data shows that a 64-year-old constituent making $63,000 a year would see their monthly premium for a benchmark silver plan jump by over 170%, from around $450 to over $1,200. That's an extra $9,000 a year. It's no wonder that Representatives Salazar and Carlos Jimenez are breaking with their party's leadership and desperately pushing for an extension. They can read the same data we can. They know their political survival depends on it. Then there's the big CBO number. A permanent extension of these credits would cost $350 billion over 10 years. Republicans will scream about this figure. But let's put it in context. The 2017 Trump tax cuts were projected to cost nearly $2 trillion over a decade. The annual U.S. defense budget is approaching $1 trillion. In the grand scheme of federal spending, $35 billion a year to prevent a nationwide healthcare crisis and a political firestorm in your own district starts to look less like profligacy and more like a pretty cheap insurance policy. This entire situation has exposed a deep, and perhaps fatal, fissure within the Republican Party, the battle between the political pragmatists and the ideological purists. The pragmatists are the members in swing districts or those with sky-high ACA enrollment, like Jen Kiggins in Virginia or the Florida contingent. They live in the real world. They have to face voters like Bob the Carpenter at town halls. They understand that allowing premiums to triple right before an election is the political equivalent of juggling chainsaws. Their calculus is simple: survival. The purists, mostly in deep red, heavily gerrymandered districts, face a different set of incentives. Their biggest threat isn't a Democrat in the general election, it's a primary challenger from their right flank. For them, any vote that looks like propping up Obamacare is an existential threat. They would rather stick to ideological principles, even if it hurts the party's national prospects. As former GOP aide Dean Rosen astutely observes, their thinking is, Democrats are going to attack us on healthcare anyway, so why should I spend tens of billions of dollars on a Democratic program if I'm still going to get whacked? This is a classic collective action problem. What is rational for the individual member is disastrous for the group. The party is trapped between its base's rhetoric and its base's reality. So here we are, watching a government shutdown unfold, not over some new, radical proposal, but over the funding for a 15-year-old law that has become deeply woven into the economic fabric of the country, especially in the very regions that politically oppose it. The great lesson here, the ultimate boss economics world takeaway, is this: once a government benefit is created and a constituency is built around it, it becomes almost impossible to remove. This isn't a moral judgment, it's an observation of political and economic gravity. You can't just unscramble the egg. Republicans are discovering that they are trapped by their own success in obstructing a different part of the law. They spent a decade trying to kill Obamacare, and in the process, they accidentally made their own voters profoundly dependent on it. Now, they're faced with an impossible choice: fund their enemy's signature achievement and anger their ideological base, or defund it and get wiped out at the polls by a furious electorate of their own constituents facing financial ruin. This is more than just a political story. It's a perfect illustration of how political signaling can have devastating and unforeseen economic consequences. It's a reminder that behind the partisan noise and the cable news shouting matches, there are millions of real people making rational economic decisions for their families. And ultimately, their revealed preferences will always have the last word. So as you watch this drama unfold, don't just see it as political theater. See it for what it is: a spectacular, high-stakes collision between ideology and incentives, between what politicians promise and what their voters actually need. Until next time, stay skeptical and follow the money. It always tells the real story.